The story of Israel and Moses continues in the book of Joshua. Let's recall what has happened so far. God chose Abraham and made his descendants into the nation of Israel. Israel ended up enslaved in Egypt. God saved Israel from Egypt through Moses. At Mount Sinai, God made a covenant with Israel. God led Israel through the wilderness. Israel camped outside the Promised Land. Moses told Israel to obey God so they could show other nations what God was like. After Moses died, Joshua led Israel. The story of Joshua has four main parts. First, Joshua led Israel into the Promised Land. There Israel faced hostility from the Canaanites. So Israel fought battles against them. After winning, Joshua divided the land among the 12 tribes. Finally, Joshua gave speeches to the people. Let's look at how it all fits together. It began with Moses dying and Joshua becoming the new leader. Joshua was portrayed as a new Moses. Like Moses, Joshua told the people to obey the Torah, God's laws from Mount Sinai. Joshua sent spies into the land, as Moses had done. This time it went much better. Some Canaanites even turned to follow Israel's God. Joshua led Israel across the Jordan River into the land. Just as the sea had parted for Moses, now the river parted. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant over, leading all Israel. In chapter 5, the story changes. The people remembered their covenant with God. The new generation was circumcised. They celebrated the Passover in the Promised Land. But then, they prepared to move forward. Joshua had a strange encounter with a mysterious warrior. It turned out he was the angelic commander of God's army. Joshua asked, "Are you for us, or for our enemies?" The warrior replied, "Neither." This showed the real question was whether Joshua was on God's side. The story was not about Israel versus the Canaanites. It was God's battle. Israel would play a role in God's plan as spectators or supporters. Next, we find stories of conflicts between Israel and Canaanite groups. First, it retells two battles in detail, then summarizes years of battle in brief. The first two battles were against Jericho and Ai. They show God's faithfulness and Israel's failure. At Jericho, Israel was to be passive. For 6 days, they let God's presence in the ark lead them around the city with music, hoping Jericho would turn to God like Rahab. But they didn't. On the 7th day, the priests blew trumpets and the walls fell. God delivered his people. Israel just needed to trust and wait. I showed the opposite. An Israelite, Achan, stole devoted goods and lied. After all God did, it was lame. Israel attacked, but lost. Only after repenting and punishing Achan did Israel win. These stories show that to inherit the land, Israel must obey God and trust his commands. No special treatment. Next, the Gibeonites, a Canaanite people, turned to follow Israel's God and made peace, unlike other kings who allied to destroy Israel. Israel battled and won decisively. The section ends summarizing victories under Moses and Joshua. These stories may bother you, especially the violence. As Jesus' followers, didn't he say, "Love your enemies"? Why is God declaring war? First, why the Canaanites? Earlier, the Bible said their culture was immoral, especially about sex. See Leviticus 18. They practiced child sacrifice. See Deuteronomy 12. God didn't want this influencing Israel. The Canaanites had to go. Did God command genocide against the Canaanites? At first, it seems so. They were totally destroyed. Nothing was left breathing. But look closer. This is hyperbole, not literal. Deuteronomy 7 first said to drive out the Canaanites, then totally destroy them. But then not to intermarry or make deals with them. You can't marry those you destroyed. Joshua is the same. Joshua 10 says no survivors in Hebron or Debir. But Joshua 15 shows Canaanites there still. Joshua uses ancient battle hyperbole. Genocide doesn't fit. Some Canaanites turned to God, like Rahab and the Gibeonites. God accepted those who turned to him. This was a unique time. Battle was only against Canaanites in the land. With others, God commanded peace. Deuteronomy 20. The stories don't tell us to commit violence in God's name. They show God bringing justice on human evil once and saving Israel from the Canaanites. The design moves on. Joshua divides the land for the 12 tribes. It's boring lists of boundaries, like a map without pictures. But for Israel, important. God's promise to Abraham to inherit the land was coming true in detail. Joshua gives 2 speeches like Moses' last speeches in Deuteronomy. He reminds them of God's generosity in bringing them to the land and rescuing them. He calls them to reject Canaanite gods and keep the covenant. If so, they'll be blessed in the land. If not, God's judgment will come on them like the Canaanites, kicked out, exiled. Joshua leaves Israel with a choice. What will they do? That's the question as the story ends. That's the book of Joshua.